I mean, even to think, as we're talking about like 2020, we'll be at the 5-year mark of that in a few months. Like it's
No, you know what else I want to see, Casey? I want to
Mhm.
see a study on, I don't even know what it would be called, a time jump, or however we are processing the last 5 years. No one seems to be able to wrap their arms around it being five. It seems like two at most to me when I think about it. And I would love to see what this phenomenon is we're all experiencing. Because when you start, you're like, that can't have been 5 years ago. That's crazy. Welcome to the Brand Brief podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and key strategies that are driving brand growth. This podcast is powered by Brand Method Media Group, and I'm your host, Kelly Kelly. Today's guest is Kacie Luaders, founding producer of Could Be Pretty Cool. Could Be Pretty Cool is an audio production company specializing in creating content about arts, entrepreneurship, and innovation. Welcome to the show, Kacie.
Thank you so much for having me here today, Kelly. It's interesting always being on the other side of the mic to be now, yes, the person who is answering questions, but I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. So we're just going to dive right in. Kacie, can you speak to how has Could Be Pretty Cool evolved since inception, and what key factors have contributed to its growth and impact in the experiential arts and culture scene?
Absolutely. So, Could Be Pretty Cool was essentially established in 2020, honestly, just as a way for me to formalize my freelancing. I worked as a theatrical sound designer and worked at various theaters around the city of Atlanta. And once the pandemic hit and all of those theaters were subsequently closed, I had to figure out a way to continue to make a living. And one of the bizarre happy accidents of that time is that everyone started a podcast. And so I had to learn how to tailor my audio skill set to the podcast medium. And during that time, there was also a large influx of support being given to independent creators. Large companies were seeing, like, oh, we can't really make big productions right now anyway. So we can give what's essentially micro budgets to us, to indie creators, to continue to be able to make content. Everyone's sitting at home, staring at their screens, listening to podcasts. And so there was just this, it was almost like the best of times to be an independent content creator for about a year and a half, starting in 2020. After, things started opening up, vaccines started rolling out, things were sort of settling. Around the 2022 mark, I would say, it became apparent that in order to continue to have a path forward, we would have to pivot and not necessarily rely on the support of larger corporations. And so where we moved into is producing podcasts for nonprofit organizations, university organizations, and just really finding new ways to support our goal of telling stories about innovators in the arts and entrepreneurs. And we're continuing that work today.
That's incredible. Yeah, I remember the time, and it was sort of a silver lining at the time if you were in, you're a creator of any kind, whether officially like a content creator or marketing communications, the arts, you could, if you were scrappy enough, you could pull it together. And I think it was a crash course for a lot of us at the time to figure out how to continue to do with less. And I felt like that just kind of evened the playing field a bit. The excuses went out the window, right? Of not having big production, or I don't have a studio, or I don't have an office. It was like you have to figure out how to make it work.
Absolutely. I think, I can say personally, I feel like I haven't even had the time to fully decompress and reflect upon the differences between being an independent creator business during that time and now. I'm sure we're going to see textbooks about it in, schools in a few years, but it was almost like new processes had to be invented because we didn't have a choice, like to your point, new ways of working remotely with people from all over the world, new ways of staying connected, new ways of, I mean, honestly, staying sane. How do you stay creative when all of the things are happening around you? And so, yes, it was definitely in some ways, I would say it was again the best of times as a creator, but also sort of the worst of times to, have to keep pushing throughout all of the craziness that was happening.
Absolutely. Now, as digital experiences and tech innovations become more integrated into arts and culture, what trends do you see influencing this space, and how has Could Be Pretty Cool adapted to or leveraged these changes?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, I come from the world of live theater, a medium that requires you to be in person. You have to leave your house. You have to go sit in a space with other humans, watching an experience right in front of you. And in truth, for many places, especially smaller regional places, since the shutdown of 2020, the audiences have not returned to pre-pandemic levels. And so I'm seeing a lot of organizations that are having to diversify their offerings by offering more robust digital programming in addition to in-person programming, implementing, ways for people to interact while they're at a live event. There appears to be this sort of period of still experimenting and figuring out what fine and performing arts especially is going to look like post-pandemic. And I would say for us, it could be pretty cool. We want to make sure that we're staying ahead of reporting on the trends, of really just capturing a snapshot of what this moment is looking like, because what we're really focused on is 5 years from now, 10 years from now. We support creative entrepreneurs, and I'm thinking about a kid who is majoring in theater right now in college. Is there going to be an industry for them to work in 10 years? What is it going to look like? Are they going to have some sort of digital skills in order to succeed? And so, yeah, we are paying attention to trends nationally, trends specifically in Georgia where we are based. And yes, just definitely seeing a lot of hybrid in person and digital experiences popping up as the norm.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that in terms of looking ahead. And in my personal life, I'm starting to already do that with my oldest is 8. And so much has shifted just all together. And, I have colleagues now that have kids that are graduating, high school or college rather. And they're people my age with kids that age are like, listen, this hopping out of college and going to get a place might not be the move. You might have to come home for a good 5 years. So it really changes kind of everything that's happened in the last 5 years has changed how we have to look at that period. The long term, do we need to start planning for multifamily homes again? Because on the other side of this are our elders that may not be able to retire. So, and then what does that look like for your life? Used to think, okay, get them to 18, get them to college. And then it's like, nope, it might not be. So that's a little bit off the topic, but just to your point and looking ahead on how different things are in the next 5 to 10 years is pretty incredible.
Oh, yes, yes. I mean, even to think, as we're talking about like 2020, we'll be at the 5 year mark of that in a few months. Like it's,
No, you know what else I want to see, Kacie? I want to
Mhm.
see a study on, I don't even know what it would be called, a time jump or however we are processing the last 5 years. No one seems to be able to wrap their arms around it being 5. It seems like 2 at most to me when I think about it. And I would love to see what this phenomenon is we're all experiencing. Because when you start, you're like, that can't have been 5 years ago. That's crazy.
Absolutely. It's humbling I would say for me, again, like you said here, what's your 5 year plan, your 10 year plan? And you're like, I don't know. That's a
I don't
million
know.
years from now. But
Right?
it's very humbling to see like, wow. 5 years can feel like
Just
just a
like
snap of the
that.
fingers. Yeah.
And then in industry wise, I think it also, we're probably processing how agile we need to be, regardless of our businesses. I know obviously in marketing and communications, whatever, what we used to be able to forecast in terms of what could be is like hyperlapsing right now, especially with the introduction of AI. And I want to ask you a little bit about that in a moment, but that's changing to me, or at least in my experience, that's changing the projections as well, because everything is speeding up seemingly.
I would agree with that. Everything is speeding up. And it seems like with we're going to talk about AI, the introduction of new technology and technology that's becoming more accessible to commercial users, folks are not having to rely as much on larger corporations or larger entities to start playing with this technology and building new things on their own. There are corners of the internet that like I can't even comprehend it already. I don't think I'm, that old, but I'm already at a point where I'm like, I don't understand what these memes mean. They are speaking a language I don't get it. I don't understand this humor. I don't understand this content that's being created both by people, by machines and mid journey and all these things. And so yes, it's inspiring. It's definitely keeping me, like as you said, agile. It's forcing me to pay attention to what's happening. But yes, it is happening quickly.
Yeah, I think that's my takeaway. Being in communications and marketing, the introduction of things like Midjourney and AI generated images and now videos that even within the last 90 days seem to have become, even more realistic looking. I try to take away the lesson and not get caught up in like what I'm looking at. I try to reverse engineer it and say, oh, a better use of this could be this, but not get caught up
Mhm.
in like what I'm actually stumbling upon on the Instagram Explore page. But yeah, it can get a little wonky.
Mhm, mhm.
So, what marketing strategies have been most effective in promoting your events and experiences? And could you share a memorable project that particularly resonated with your audience?
Sure. I would say for us this year, participating in accelerator programs or fellowship programs has been an unexpected marketing tool. In particular, earlier this year, our company was a member of the Truist Foundation Fellowship, which is a fellowship for small Georgia-based businesses who have an economic development component to them. And at first, I didn't really see us as having an economic development component. We're a podcast production company. Yes, we talk to entrepreneurs and indie artists, but I really had to like accept, like, oh, telling these stories, providing a platform for these folks is a way of hopefully connecting them to more opportunities, connecting folks who are listening to, thoughts and ideas that can help spawn their economic development. And so I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, this is what it is. And so through this fellowship, we put on our first live podcast recording event where we got three experts in the field, all creative business owners, and had them do a live panel. We invited an audience. And it was super interactive. The audience was able to ask questions. We had like a live polling tool so they could kind of guide what the conversation was about. And so that like group of people, periodically I've like seen them around town or they've messaged me like, I'm still thinking about that insight from the event and I want to show you this thing that I came up with. It was really the first time that I saw like, oh, in-person events to help push digital products or projects, because we did release, the live recording widely, is a really interesting marketing tool that we're honestly looking at exploring more in-person events next year. But yeah, I would say live podcast recordings, just to really get to know the audience, have them in a space together, is a marketing tool that we're going to be exploring more.
And so, going back a little bit to the tech aspect, as it continues to play a larger role in event production and promotion, how do you ensure that the experiences you create still keep that human connection and sense of community.
Absolutely. So going back to this live podcast event, there was a tool we used called Mentimeter that allowed the audience to just scan a QR code and then questions would pop up on the phone like, what is your largest barrier to, your creative business? Is it financial? Is it connections? Is it, finding opportunities? And the audience will vote on their phones and we were able to display the results real time for everyone to see. So then it's like, oh, like I thought that most people would say financial, but it looks like the majority is, finding opportunities. So panel, let's talk about that. How do you, connect to find opportunities? So I
Hmm.
think using technology as a tool to further foster the in-person experience is something that can really help like create something greater than the sum of both of those parts. And I think that yes, continuing to find ways to make the technology a just like a pathway to interactivity with the in-person experience versus like okay, everyone's going to stare at their
As a
phones.
replacement.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly is something that we're continuing to explore.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's great. I'm seeing more in this space where, anyone that's a part of the marketing team, this is a big challenge for them is how to, utilize the tools that we have available because there's some, definitely benefits there, but not allowing it to overshadow the human experience. Some companies or teams that, that's not a necessarily a priority. They like, hey, I saw an ad for this AI thing and it can replace all of this and like let's just run with it and then you start to see it becomes very a sterile interaction. If it's content, if it's event wise, it becomes there's friction there. And I think we'll probably see more of that going forward of where the people in charge they're gonna have to figure out how to make that connection. It's not always clean or linear, but they're gonna have to figure out how to balance it.
I hope so. And it's going to be, yeah, people like us having to continue to have these conversations and to hopefully hold them accountable. Sometimes the stakeholders at the top are just looking at the spreadsheets and the budgets
And then in the
and
next 90 days, huh?
in the next 90 days. And so, yes, having these conversations about the why, I think is going to become even more important.
Absolutely. What emerging trends do you think will shape the future of arts and cultural experiences, and how is Could Be Pretty positioning itself to lead or adapt to these changes?
A couple years ago, we were hearing this term immersive. We're going to do, immersive Van Gogh, where you're not just going to see the painting, you're going to be a part of it and you'll be, surrounded by the artwork.
Mm-hmm.
Or, this is the immersive museum where you're not just going to look at
Yeah.
the art, you're a part of the art and it's selfie stations and things to, for people to interact with. And I appreciate all of that. I think it's, if we're getting people out of the house to have an experience, a creative or cultural experience, like that is a win. What I would love to see, perhaps, are sort of more of that type of thinking, maybe not as, I guess commercial is the wrong word, but I would love to see more.
Manufactured.
Yeah, I would love to see more like in the more funding and research and development support for independent artists who are looking to maybe produce some sort of immersive work. That stuff is really, really expensive. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why those ticket prices are very, very expensive. But, what are local stories that if we could find them a warehouse and they could get a grant to do an immersive retelling of some historical event that happened in that community to get people to come out and experience their own community in a new way through art? Like, what are ways that we can use technology, immersion, getting people out of the house into a space that could tell stories about community in a way that they aren't currently being told. That's a trend I would love to see. Again, I love the ice cream museums and all of that, but I would love some funding to go towards some indies to start doing these experiences as well.
So what's next for Could Be Pretty Cool? What is on the horizon for you guys?
Yes, so we have some exciting things that are coming up. I can't fully say it yet. I'm so sorry, but we're actually going to be a company in residence with another Atlanta-based
Wow.
podcast production company that is going to help with our capacity to get more projects churning because we'll have a dedicated studio space. Also, for the remainder of this year, we are a essentially a company in residence at Emory through the Emory Arts and Social Justice Program.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So, yes, December 4th, we'll be having our final showcase, a hybrid project between Emory and Spelman. So, very excited about continuing to bridge connections and tell community stories through arts and technology. And yeah, just continuing to try to figure out how to be a creator-led business in the midst of all the things. It's exciting and looking forward to working with as many collaborators as possible.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. That's going to wrap today's show. Thank you to our incredible guest, Kacie Luaders, founding producer of Could Be Pretty Cool. We're going to have contact information for the company in the show notes for anyone interested in supporting. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review. We'll see you next time.